13. Santa Lucia. Bruno got up especially early that morning and made his way down to the kitchen before his mother had even woken up. He was determined to start Santa Lucia Day in the proper way. He filled a bowl with cereal and added a little milk. "How about a glass of juice too?" suggested Annalisa helpfully. She had also got up early. She wanted to make sure that Bruno remembered about taking breakfast to his mother, but he had not needed reminding. Bruno poured some orange juice into a glass and placed it onto a tray. He then placed the bowl of cereal onto the tray and lifted the whole thing. Now for the tricky bit. He knew he had to be very careful. He suddenly remembered a scene in a pantomime he saw a few years ago. "I hope I don't end up like Wishy-Washy."
"Wishy-Washy? Who is this? This very silly name. I like it."
"He's Aladdin's best friend. There was this one point when they were making custard pies and the cream and gunk ended up all over him. I hope Mum's breakfast doesn't end up all over me."
"Better be very careful in taking it upstairs then,"
warned Annalisa, her eyes fixed on him. He carried the tray over to the bottom of the stairs and he started to climb them very slowly. He didn't want to drop anything. When he had reached the 5th step, he noticed the bowl starting to glide to the right. Very calmly, he stopped where he was and lifted the right side of the tray very slightly, and the bowl stopped moving. Eventually, after what seemed like ages to Bruno, he had almost reached the top of the stairs when he caught his foot on the top step. The tray flew up into the air. Bruno feared the worst. He desperately lunged to catch the tray, but he fell face down onto the landing. He waited for the crashing sound. He knew that he would end up like Wishy-Washy after all, and he was really upset that all his good work had come to nothing. He closed his eyes tight and put his hands over his ears and waited for the sound of the tray to come crashing down. But there was no crash. He opened his eyes cautiously and looked at the ground. There was no sign of the tray. When he looked up, he could hardly believe his eyes. The tray was hovering in mid-air with the cereal and the juice unspoilt. It didn't take him long to realise that someone had helped out with a little magic. "Phew, that was a close one. Thanks, Annalisa." Bruno stood up and carefully took hold of the tray, suspended in mid-air, and carried it to the door of his mother's bedroom. He put the tray down on the floor and knocked loudly. He wanted it to seem like room service in a hotel to make it extra special. He heard a sleepy voice coming from inside. "Bruno, is there something wrong?" came his mother's voice. "No, Mum, nothing's wrong. In fact, I have a surprise for you." And with that, he opened the door, picked up the tray, and took it over to his mother. "Happy Santa Lucia Day, Mum." Mrs. Watson looked at him. "Happy what?" "Santa Lucia Day. It's a Scandinavian festival day when girls have candles on their heads and parents get breakfast in bed." Mrs. Watson still looked unconvinced. "It's true, Mum." "Well, I can't say I've ever heard of it." She paused. "But I like the idea very much. I think it is a tradition we should keep every year. At least the breakfast in bed part. I'm not so sure about candles on heads. Oh, I could get used to this." Mrs. Watson tucked into her cereal and sipped her orange juice. "Oh, this is lovely. Thank you, Bruno. It's very kind of you." Bruno was filled with pride. It wasn't often he made his mother this happy, but it was really a good feeling. As a reward, I'm going to let you have your telly back. It's in the cupboard. Cool! Thanks, Mum! And he opened the cupboard door. But then a thought came into his head. Actually, could I ask for something else instead? Mrs. Watson looked at him suspiciously. You mean there is something you want more than your telly? Are you feeling all right? I'm feeling more than all right. Just a few weeks ago, there was nothing Bruno liked more than watching his TV. Mrs. Watson was amazed. What on earth could it be that he wished for? Bruno caught a glimpse of Annalisa out of the corner of his eye. He winked at her, and she grinned the widest smile he had ever seen. She knew what he was going to ask for, and it filled her with happiness. But she would have to wait a few more days.
Jingle all the way.